Friday practice in Suzuka is over and the fastest driver of the day was Max Verstappen in the Red Bull as he's looking to bounce back after a difficult Australian Grand Prix. But what did we learn from practice? Well, today I'm going to be doing a data analysis from practice. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'm going to be talking about the top 5 teams, which are Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. Yes, Friday practice in Suzuka is over, and as we sometimes see in Japan, the running for practice was very limited due to the rain. In FP1 it was at least dry, but by FP2 the rain had arrived. Unfortunately though, the rain was not really enough for intermediates, but it was too wet for slicks, meaning that there was not a great deal of running at all, which was a shame. Right now there is a potential for some rain to come during the Grand Prix, which means I was surprised no one really wanted to try the circuit out, so that we could get an idea of what conditions could be like for them. Teams do get an extra set of intermediates if it rains in practice, so it was not like they were using a set of intermediates that they would need for the Grand Prix. There was still a little bit of running in FP2, so let's compare the fastest time from FP1 and compare it to a lap from FP2. This will help to show how much less grip there was in the second practice with the rain and greasy conditions. It did dry towards the end, so we did still get to see some slick running. The fastest time in FP1 was set by Max Verstappen, and that was a time of a 1:30.056. And the fastest time in FP2 was set by Oscar Piastri in the Mclaren, and that time was a 1:34.725. Unfortunately though, there is an issue with the data for this lap, as there was for Lewis Hamilton who was second. So we're going to use the lap of Charles Leclerc who was in third. And when you look at these laps, it almost looks like they are running in a different formula between the two practice sessions, which you would expect in the greasy conditions. Leclerc has to back off sooner than Verstappen and far more aggressively than Max, which is not really a surprise. Through the S section alone, which is high speed and high downforce, Leclerc cannot get anywhere near as fast as Max Verstappen, which is down to the track lacking any grip. In the S's, Verstappen peaks at 252 km per hour and Leclerc only 210 km per hour. One thing that is interesting as well is that when the track is wet, some corners which are usually straightforward actually become more tricky in the wet, and that is what's happening here. In the two Degners, you can see that Leclerc has to back off a lot more than Verstappen, so much so that he then gets a chance to speed up again before the second Degner, where he goes a lot slower than Max. Towards the end of the lap, as Leclerc has built some tyre temperature, and also it looks like the circuit was a little bit drier at the back end of the circuit, you can see that Leclerc is much more in line with the time being set by Max Verstappen, showing that if practice was another 30 minutes in length, that we could have seen then some very good running at the back end of the session. But even so, Max Verstappen was a lot faster due to the drier conditions. Max Verstappen's lap from FP1 was faster than his time in any practice session at the circuit from last year, showing that there is a significant amount of development going on in F1. Even though it was faster than any practice session from last year, Verstappen was still 22 km per hour slower in a straight line than he was in qualifying last year, showing that there is a lot of pace still to come. Speaking of top speed, let's compare the top speed from FP1 for each team. For this, I'm going to be taking the fastest lap that each team and driver was able to reach, and we're going to use their top speed that they reached. And what can we see when we look at these? Well, the first thing that we see is that for most teams, they very much have their power units turned all the way down, which is what you come to expect from FP1. As mentioned in my preview and predictions, the top speed in qualifying was over 330 km per hour, and yet here, only Haas were able to be within 3 km per hour of that top speed, which tells me that Haas had things turned up a lot more than their rivals. Even with things turned down though, we can still see some things that we usually do see, which is Red Bull were fast in a straight line, and Mercedes and McLaren are a little bit behind, but Mercedes look to be a little bit closer than they usually are. Going into qualifying, we are going to see a lot more from these teams when it comes to actual performance, and I anticipate that we could see the top speed improve by another 15 kilometers per hour or so. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, they have brought some upgrades to the Japanese Grand Prix. However, they have only brought the upgrades to one of their cars, which you would expect to then go to Fernando Alonso, given he is much faster and is higher in the Drivers' Championship. However, that is not the case, as Lance Stroll was given the upgrades and Alonso will have to wait just a little bit longer for his upgrades. Even so, let's compare their fastest laps. And as you can see when you compare these laps, Alonso without the upgrades was roughly 1.5 seconds faster than Stroll, as Alonso seemed to be much more comfortable around this circuit. Suzuka is not normally one of Stroll's stronger racers, it has to be said. And when you look at this lap, it becomes a little bit more clear why and where. Firstly, ignore the S section as there looks to be a glitch with the data. On the run though, through Dunlop Curve, here you can see Alonso is far more stable and able to get to full throttle a lot sooner than teammate Stroll. And the next area where there is a clear difference is about halfway around Spoon Curve, which you can see here that Alonso is much faster. And finally, at the Casio Triangle Chicane, Alonso launches a car into the corner compared to Lance Stroll. For Stroll, he has the data from Alonso's lap for him to now learn, and that's really what it's all about for him. Learn where he's losing out and improve. He has the upgrades, so he has the potential to be the faster car this weekend. For Mercedes, today looked rather good in FP1. George Russell was in 4th place and Lewis Hamilton was in 5th place. However, I expect this to change for Mercedes. I don't expect that this charge will last. They have looked a little bit stronger at the beginning of practice a couple of times this year, only to fall back as the weekend goes on, due to them possibly having things turned up a little bit more than their rivals, which might explain why they were one of the faster cars in a straight line as well. Both Hamilton and Russell were within 1/10 of a second of each other, but there was a slight data issue with Russell's lap, even though he was faster. So we are going to compare Max Verstappen's lap time to Lewis Hamilton to see where the differences are between Mercedes and Verstappen. At the exit of Degner 2, you can see there's a large difference here. That's probably also down to a data glitch, so don't look too much into that. Through the high-speed sections of Sector 1 in the S-curves, you can see that Verstappen is absolutely hooked up when compared to Hamilton, which shows once again the high-speed downforce of the Red Bull when compared to Mercedes. For Mercedes right now, it looks alright. But like I said, I anticipate that they could drop back a little bit as they may have things turned up a little bit more than their rivals already. If that is the case, then we could see them fall back to once again be the 4th fastest car this weekend. For McLaren, they topped FP2 with Oscar Piastri, but that session doesn't really mean a great deal of anything, especially as 7 cars never even left the pits, and there was only a handful of drivers who did laps at the end on slick tyres. And McLaren going into this weekend should be confident. They are typically strong at high speed, high downforce circuits, and Suzuka is one of the highest speed circuits on the calendar. But they cannot be too complacent, and they've not brought any upgrades this weekend. So, let's compare now the time of Oscar Piastri to Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who is their main rival so far. And when you look at these times, you can see that through the S section, there's not that much to tell apart between them, which once again shows how McLaren are stronger at high speed downforce, and they can close that gap to Ferrari. However, you can see as the lap continues where they start to lose out, and that's on the exits of corners, on the exit of Spoon Curve, and also on the exits of the very tight hairpin. You can see that they lose time compared to Ferrari, as Ferrari can get the power down and get the drive out of the corners, and this is where McLaren are still struggling. I don't expect it's going to be a big issue for them, but it is going to cost them, and I anticipate that they might not be as fast as Ferrari this weekend, and they might actually just be the 3rd fastest team. For Ferrari, right now it's looking like it will be very difficult for them to replicate what they managed in Australia, as Red Bull look like they have made strides forwards with their upgrades. Even so, Carlos Sainz is still a very clear 3rd place, and Charles Leclerc was 6th in FP1. Due to issues once again with the data, we can't really do a fair comparison between Leclerc and Sainz, as much as I would absolutely love to, because I do want to see where Leclerc lost out against Sainz, but sadly that's not going to be possible. Hopefully for qualifying this is fixed. Right now, it does look like Ferrari will be once again the second fastest team behind Red Bull. And finally for Red Bull in FP1, it was a 1-2 and they are looking comfortable so far, which they really should do. This circuit is perfect for Red Bull and plays to all of their strengths. With that in mind, I expect we should see them fly this weekend and probably be even further ahead than they were in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. Let's compare the laps of Verstappen to Sergio Perez. Once again, ignore the Degner curves. When you look at this lap, you can see how Verstappen is just so much more confident in that Red Bull at high speed. You can see through those S's, he's able to gain a couple of tenths alone in that section on teammate Sergio Perez. Beyond this point, it's pretty hard to tell, mainly because there is so many issues with the data. With Verstappen and Perez, I think it's mainly Perez where there are the issues on this lap. But even so, one thing is for certain, and that is Max Verstappen is looking very comfortable and he should take pole position and dominate the Japanese Grand Prix. So we couldn't really learn a great deal today, mainly due to FP2 being a bit of a washout and FP1 there being so many issues with the data. Hopefully that's fixed for qualifying, and in qualifying, it should be very interesting, at least behind Verstappen. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.